I'm David Lombardo, and this is WCNY's The Capitol Press Room, and we're going to share an excerpt of an interview we recorded for the Capitol Press Room television broadcast with Assembly Racing and Wagering Committee Chair Carrie Woerner, a Capital Region Democrat, who talked about what the Assembly is doing to address problem gambling here in New York. Well, Assemblymember, thank you so much for making the time. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure, David. It's always good to talk with you.
Glad you feel that way. So over the last, say, quarter of a century, we've really seen an explosion of gambling opportunities here in New York, whether it's racinos, casinos, sports wagering, then mobile sports wagering, then casinos in New York City, and now prediction markets and everything that they might entail. How prepared do you feel like New York has been to address problem gambling associated with all these different forms of gambling as they've come online?
I'll be honest, I think we grossly underestimated what the impact would be on people who develop a compulsion for gambling. I don't think we anticipated the growth in that when we legalized the mobile sports wagering, but we're starting to see the trends, and I think it's important that we begin to really address this in a serious way.
And there's a serious dialogue going on about this at the Capitol right now. In fact, earlier this year, the Assembly passed a package of bills, some of which were yours. And I'm curious, what, if any, of them stood out to you as particularly meaningful for this moment right now in addressing problem gambling?
You know, I'm going to just sort of give you a broader answer to that.
Hijack the show. Go for it.
You know, we have been putting money into problem gambling for a while now. And one of the things that we did in concert with legalizing mobile sports wagering is we put a lot more money towards OASAS, the Office of Addiction Services, to address treatment and recovery, as well as some data gathering to understand the prevalence.
Sure.
And I think what is becoming clear is that from our own research that the Gaming Commission has done about the number of calls to the hotline, as well as nationwide research now that many states have legalized sports wagering and mobile sports wagering, is that there's a strong correlation between mobile sports wagering and problem gambling in specific demographics, particularly young men.
Sure.
And so we could continue to put money into this, but the trend line suggests that it would become like a giant hole that we would just continuously put money into because the problem doesn't go away. So I think the responsible thing to do is to, through statute and regulation, put some requirements on the companies themselves to build safeguards into the games so that we prevent, to the extent possible, compulsive play from developing. And that's what this package, the 6 bills that we passed, is the first step along that path.
So yeah, in terms of these bills that have moved through the Assembly, there's legislation that would address the voluntary self-exclusion list, making that, say, electronic. There's this idea of knowing your customers and being aware of sort of the at-risk behavior that someone might demonstrate. There's also the idea of addressing the advertising restrictions on mobile sports wagering. And to me, that's an interesting one because we see sports wagering all over the place, and that's not just for the people watching sporting events because it's inundated with that coverage, but other things are being inundated with sports wagering ads as well. What should the rules of the road look like for this moving forward?
So what we started with in the bill that you referenced is just saying the same rules that apply to casinos should apply to the casino that's in your pocket.
Sure.
Right. So mobile sports wagering should have to conform to the same advertising requirements or restrictions that casinos do. So that's, I think, just the first step. I think ultimately we want to reduce the amount of advertising that happens in the game because that's where we're seeing, particularly young people, most of their betting happens while the game is happening.
That's where the action is.
That's where the action is. And so for them, the advertising has become a prompt to place that next bet. And we want to try and, for people who have a risk profile, we want to slow that down. And that's where the combination of the advertising restrictions and the Know Your Customer bill really intersect. So in the Know Your Customer bill, what we're doing is we're requiring that the platforms develop profiles of their players. identifying those who are low risk, medium risk, and high risk, recognizing that there is probably a path that people can go from low to medium to high. And that once we have that structure in place, where that profiling is built based on behavior, so based on the type of play, the speed of play, their behavior with respect to withdrawals, we can then step forward and say, okay, now what we're going to say is, as people progress down that path, you need to turn up the protections. So reduce the amount of in-play advertising they see, reduce the prompts that they get, put limits on how much they can bet, how frequently they can bet, based on an understanding, based on behavior of where their risk profiles are. So this know your customer approach creates that framework. I think we've taken some steps with advertising to kind of make sure that they're not excessive and that they provide that requirement the full time. They have to list out the helpline so that if you are seeing it, not only are we advertising the game, but we're advertising how you can get help if there's a problem. So this is just the first step, but I think these two things are connected.
Well, sticking with that broader theme of trying to prevent a problem from materializing, another bill that has been considered by the Assembly has to do with a task force on what are known as prop bets. And these are the bets that are a little more fun than just who's going to win a game. This could be how many rebounds someone's going to have. It could be how long the national anthem is going to go for, although I think that one might be actually illegal under New York's rules. But what do you see when you look at prop bets as a potential problem?
So I think there's two kinds of problems. One is that certain kinds of bets can be easily manipulated. So if there's a lot of, the games try to even out the money wagered on overs and on unders.
And that's because, for people who aren't familiar, this is basically, if they say Dave Lombardo is going to have 10 rebounds, you can either say over, or you're going to say Dave's 5'8", what's he doing in the NBA? Let's take the under.
Right,
Sure.
Exactly. Thank you for explaining. So the platforms try to even it out, right? Because they don't want to lose one way or the other. Mm-hmm. But if, say, you see the money is all going substantially on the overs, there's a possibility that the game could be manipulated so that the performance is actually under. And that would provide a payday for the person who bets on the under. And we have seen that. There have been some high-profile cases.
Sure.
And so I think we want to look at prop bets to say, how can we minimize the potential that the integrity of the game suffers based on the wagering that's happening? That's a big problem, and I think that's something we need to really focus on. Because sports, we want people to believe that the game is not fixed, that there's an actual performance-based outcome that's going to matter. The second problem is that statistically, 94% of the time, the house wins on those prop bets.
Sure.
So if you have a problem gambling, if you are not using just your entertainment dollars, but you've wagered your housing payment for that month,
sure,
and you're hoping to get it back, betting on those prop bets is not the way to do it, because 94% of the time the house wins. That's how they make their money. And so I think it's important for us to tie in this notion of risk profiling and the types of bets people have access to. Because if you're just hanging out and you're having fun and you got $100 to spend and you're saying, I want to bet on how often Carrie's going to jump up in her seat. Okay, that's great, but that's not a way to make a living.
Although I am a little excited about gambling on the state assembly now.
Well,
that's me and my problem.
We could talk about prediction markets,
yeah.
But so I think that we need to make sure that we are not encouraging people to bet more than they can afford. And these prop bets, which are funny and fun and appealing, and the parlays look like, wow, I could really make a lot of money if I hit all 5 of these
Stacking
things.
up all those prop bets, yeah.
Right. You're not going to. We should all take a statistics class. Yeah. You're not going to.
Right.
And so I think there are, and that's what that task force is going to look at, is the intersection of the statistical probability, risk profiling, and the economics of prop bets. So I'm looking forward to seeing that come to fruition.
So if these are some of the ideas that made it across the finish line in the Assembly,
Right.
what was left on the cutting room floor? Was there anything else that you are interested in pursuing or maybe were pursuing but were told, hey, not yet, or the casino lobby's not excited with this, or some other entities got a problem with this? Is there anything else that you've got kicking around?
Absolutely. And I will say that the science of this is evolving. And so we're paying attention to what the researchers who study the cognitive effects of games on individuals are unveiling. And we're trying to be guided by that. But we are looking at things like the use of third-party payer systems. So you are, by law, not allowed to use credit to place a wager. But on the mobile sports apps, you can connect your Apple Pay or your PayPal or your Venmo, and nobody knows. And there's plausible deniability by the platforms. They have no idea where your money is coming from. So you can just flip in and out credit cards, and they don't know. And on the credit side, they get around that restriction by giving you a cash advance. So you're taking a cash advance out on your credit card, which is at a higher interest rate than even your credit card would be. So people who are in this position where they are just trying to win that next bet, to clear up their losses, and they're using whatever financial mechanism they can. That's putting them in a lot of harm's way. So looking at how do we get rid of that and maybe make you actually connect your bank account.
Sure, like a debit account or your savings account.
Right, exactly.
Money you actually have.
And do an ACH transfer into the system, so that when your bank account is empty, you have to stop. So we're looking at some of those things. We're looking at limiting withdrawals. Not limiting withdrawals, limiting the behavior of canceling the withdrawal.
Okay.
Because that's a real sign that you have a problem if you cancel the withdrawal and then immediately turn around or you place the withdrawal request and immediately turn around and cancel it. That's a real red flag. So just thinking about things like that, thinking about how do we slow down the game a little bit and give you breathing room. One of the other bills that we passed in this package was one that requires that the platforms present you monthly with a statement. Here's how much you wagered, here's how much you lost, here's how much you won.
Look at it in the cold light of day.
Exactly, because one of the things we know is that if you are presented with that information, you're likely to say, oh, wait a minute, I need to change my behavior. So we want to try and give people the tools that they need to be able to control this. Mm-hmm.
Well, lastly, we referenced the emergence of prediction markets. These are essentially commodities regulated at the federal level, and that's all a fancy way of saying it's gambling in another form.
Right.
What, if anything, can the state do to regulate this? And do you see this as a particularly nefarious form of de facto gambling, given that it creates so many more options of betting? Because you want to bet on the Oscars, you want to bet on whether New York is going to do universal child care this year, you want to bet on who's going to win the congressional race. It's all out there.
There's mention markets. Mm-hmm. How many times is Dave going to use a particular phrase?
Sure.
That's a form of betting as well. How many people are going to cross off this crosswalk? So these are regulated only by the federal government, the CFTC, Commodities Futures Trading Corporation.
I'll take your word for it.
Yep. But in the Constitution and by law, the states have the right, have the sole right to regulate gambling in their states. So these markets are operating illegally in states.
Because you feel like they're gambling.
They are gambling. And we are, the state is taking steps,
sure,
just as many states are, to end the role that those entities play in the gaming universe in each state. So we have The cease and desist letters have gone out. The Attorney General has signed on to lawsuits. We are really working on trying to get them out of New York. That we have a robust set of regulations, becoming more robust to manage the universe of gambling options, and these are not in our universe.
And that was Assembly Racing and Wagering Committee Chair Carrie Woerner, a Capital Region Democrat.
Fraud and lawsuit abuse raise car insurance costs for New Yorkers. Reforms are being proposed to mitigate their impact, but some Albany leaders want to keep the status quo. Information on these reforms is available at keepnewyorkaffordable.org.